Last year I had the great privilege of being a member of the Warwick Commission, which was an international commission that included lawyers, economists, a philosopher, political scientists, and trade policy practitioners from around the world, rich and poor countries alike. Our task was to really identify the problems of the trade system and to propose modest, limited, grounded, policy realizable solutions to some of these. So in some ways they're very modest, but I want to draw your attention to three of these because I think, to its credit, the Australian government has done much to take some of them up. So, and there's growing interest in other parts of the world as well. The first is this whole question of decision making. Right now, the WTO is robustly and ruggedly democratic. Nothing can be agreed until everything is agreed. If one member out of 153 chokes at any point along the way or says, I can't do this, everything grinds to a halt. So this means you have a problem of lowest common denominator outcomes, but also decision-making becomes excruciatingly difficult. We really have advocated a very simple recommendation that would loosen the straitjacket of the principle that every agreement that's negotiated has to apply to 153 countries. And we've proposed some very simple recommendations for the membership to consider around that. The objection to that is that many members feel it will take away the power of very weak nations to be able to say, no, we're not comfortable. But what we're talking about is, in the best sense of this term, is about coalitions of the willing that would like to move forward in an area, but subject to very, very strict criteria. They have to be welfare enhancing. Agreements have to be open to all countries to join at any point, and for their participation to be assisted and facilitated if it involves adjustment costs. Agreements in new areas that are outside of the WTO have to be proven to be appropriate in the WTO rather than another international organization. That's trying to stop from ever happening again the way that the big corporations in the US and Europe were able to smuggle intellectual property rights harmonization rules into an organization where it patently doesn't belong. We outlined other very, very strict criteria, and this is really aimed at creating variable geometry is what the Europeans call it. It's worked well there. It's in the history of the WTO system. Decisions have been made like in this way in the past, and we're arguing for that again. The two other areas, and I'll just speak very quickly about them and then I'll finish. We've argued that this whole idea of special and differential treatment needs to be treated in a much more nuanced and sophisticated way. Right now, China can lay claim to the same rights as a developing country as Cambodia or Lesotho or Vanuatu. That is, the rich countries, quite rightly, I would say, balk at that. They say we are actually talking about countries at very different stages of development with different resources and different capacities. And because the whole development discourse in the WTO is so highly politicized, all it takes is for one member to say, that goes against my development interests for everything to grind to a halt. And we've argued that this whole issue of special and differential treatment needs to be much more nuanced. There needs to be greater distinctions made between the different capacities and needs of developing countries at different stages. That, believe it or not, is a very controversial argument. The last one, it may even be controversial in this room. The last one is one that relates very squarely to Millennium Development Goals. 3 years ago at Gleneagles, the rich countries of the world made a commitment to the Aid for Trade initiative, which was to redouble and focus a significant part of the aid effort, not just on poverty reduction programs, but also on development and on building economic capacity and the capacity to participate in the global economy. The problem is, well, there's many problems. That was a purely exhortatory initiative. There's no way to bind nations to those commitments. The commitments cut across the agendas and the mandates of many different international and regional organizations, as well as many different governments. We made an argument that that was twofold, really, and this is a role for you in particular. One is to really put pressure on governments to live up to their aid for trade commitments. And I think I don't know, Murray might be able to talk a little bit about where the Australian government, without wanting him to drop him in anything here. Simon Crean, our trade minister, made a speech about this a few weeks ago. It was a speech on Australian trade policy at a very high-profile lecture. But what he really talked about was not about trade policy, not about the WTO, not about free trade agreements, but about the Aid for Trade initiative. And I was really impressed and kind of interested to hear a trade minister talking so up close and personal about this kind of partnership for development. So I just wanted to finish on a kind of, not the world is going to hell in a handcart along with the multilateral trade system, but some what are modest, but I think positive and constructive steps that the membership is facing ahead of it. So, thanks.